The California afternoon sunlight bathed the Grand Pacific Hotel in a golden hue, its rays reflecting off the ornate chandeliers like scattered jewels. The air was warm but light, filled with the scent of fresh flowers and the distant melody of a string quartet warming up. Inside the bridal dressing room, I stood before the mirror, applying a final layer of lipstick, my hands trembling slightly not from nerves but from joy. Today was my sister Jessica's wedding day. The little girl who once ran barefoot through our backyard, dreaming of her fairy tale moment, was finally marrying the man she called her Soulmat. Jessica had always been the center of attention, bubbly, magnetic, effortlessly charming. I was the quieter one, the bookworm, the dependable sister who lingered on the edges of every social gathering, but that had never dimmed my love for her. Despite our differences, especially as children, our bond had grown with time, shaped by hardship and the passage of years, especially after Dad passed away 5 years ago. That loss, so vast and suffocating, had brought us closer in ways we never expected. "Maggie, are you ready?" Robert's voice came through the door, warm and tinged with nervous excitement. My husband of 12 years, the anchor in my otherwise soft-spoken life. He was already dressed, probably pacing by now. "Just 2 more minutes," I called back, doing one last check in the mirror. The navy blue dress Jessica had picked for me complemented my dark hair and pale complexion. "This color suits you best," she'd said. Simple words, but they had touched me. Robert opened the door and stepped inside. Even after more than a decade together, seeing him in a suit still made my heart flutter. Years as a firefighter had sculpted his body, but it was his eyes, gentle, unwavering, that had drawn me to him first. "You look absolutely beautiful," he said, placing his hands on my shoulders. "Jessica must look stunning too." "She does," I said, smiling. "I saw just a glimpse of her dress yesterday at the rehearsal. She looked like she stepped out of a dream." We stood quietly for a moment, gazing into each other's eyes. We never had children, a choice made silently between us, but we built a life that was full of peace, of shared values, of love. "Do you think David is a good man?" I asked quietly. Robert nodded. "I talked to him at dinner last night. He's intelligent, grounded. Talks about his restaurant with real passion." But what mattered most was the way he looked at Jessica with real gentleness. I felt a weight lift from my chest. Jessica had struggled in short-lived relationships, broken engagements, heartbreak she buried behind her ever-radiant smile. But David seemed to bring out something quieter in her, something real. "When you're ready," Robert said, "head to the chapel. I want to check on Jessica before the ceremony starts." "Don't get too emotional," he added with a playful grin. "You'll ruin your makeup." I laughed, dabbing the corners of my eyes just in case. He was right, tears came easily to me. Happy endings, bittersweet songs, even heartfelt commercials could reduce me to a puddle. Today I knew I wouldn't make it through the vows. Dry-eyed the hallway outside the bridal suite was lined with soft carpeting and framed photos of other weddings that had taken place at the Grand Pacific. As I walked, memories came flooding back. Jessica twirling in our childhood living room in a makeshift wedding dress, giggling as she held an old flower bouquet. Even then she had dreamed of this day. I reached the bridal suite and knocked softly. "Margaret." "Come in, dear," my mother's voice called from inside. I opened the door and gasped. Jessica stood before the full-length mirror, a vision in ivory silk and lace. The dress clung gently to her figure, a vintage silhouette that whispered elegance. Her veil shimmered with delicate embroidery, and her eyes were bright with anticipation. "Jessie, you look absolutely gorgeous." She turned, beaming, and stepped toward me. "Thank you, Maggie. You look amazing, too." Our mother was behind her, making final adjustments to the veil. "You girls, both so beautiful," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Your father must be watching over us today." The 3 of us joined hands, heads bowed for a quiet moment. We weren't a perfect family, far from it, but in that instant, surrounded by the scent of roses and the rustle of satin, I felt love anchoring us together. The chapel was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers overhead caught the sunlight, scattering it like a rainbow across the white rose arrangements that lined the aisle. Over 100 guests had taken their seats, a hum of excitement in the air. Robert and I sat near the front with our mother. She dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, her smile sad and proud at once. Dad should have been here, his absence, like a shadow next to us, but I knew he would have been proud. Jessica had finally found happiness. They're Jessica's college friends, Robert whispered, nodding toward a group of elegant women chatting at a nearby table. I smiled. Jessica had always been popular, even in college, gravitating people to her like a lighthouse in a storm. Then the music changed. A hush swept through the chapel. The ceremony was about to begin. David entered from the side of the altar, tall and composed in a dark tuxedo. He looked nervous, brushing at his jacket, but the moment he glanced down the aisle, his entire expression softened. Bridesmaids began their walk, one by one, in flowing silver gowns. Then, finally, Jessica. She stepped into view, her hand resting on Mom's arm, her smile serene and radiant. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. She looked ethereal, like the embodiment of every childhood wish, every romantic daydream. Her dress shimmered with each step, the veil floating like a whisper behind her. She looked at each guest as she passed, nodding and smiling. When her eyes met mine, her smile deepened, and I felt my chest tighten with emotion. When she reached David, our mother placed her hand into his. He whispered something to her that made her laugh, and that laughter, genuine, light, echoed through the silent chapel. Then the minister spoke. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today. The ceremony unfolded like a dream. Their vows were heartfelt and tender, their promises echoing with sincerity. As David slid the ring onto Jessica's finger, his hands trembled. Jessica, receive this ring as a sign of my love and commitment. His voice cracked, and Jessica's eyes filled with tears. She followed with her vow, her voice unwavering. David, receive this ring as a sign of my love. When the minister declared, "You may kiss the bride," the room erupted in applause. I clapped until my hands hurt, tears slipping freely down my cheeks. She had made it. My sister had found real love. The newlyweds walked down the aisle hand in hand, smiling as flower petals drifted around them. As guests moved toward the cocktail area, the hotel lobby was transformed into a scene from a romance novel. Flower arrangements on every table, waiters in tuxedos offering champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Robert and I stood by the window, watching Jessica and David pose for photos in the garden. She looks like an angel, I whispered. Robert nodded. And David's mother seems nice. We chatted briefly. She's already calling Jessica her daughter. That gave me comfort. If families could truly merge with warmth and respect, perhaps their future was already off to a good start. Mom joined us, still dabbing at her eyes. Thank you both for today. Your father would have been so proud. He was always proud of Jessica, I said softly, then squeezed her hand. And of you. Soon we were ushered into the grand ballroom. The transformation was unbelievable. Candles flickered on every table. Roses of pink, red, and ivory bloomed in crystal vases, and the scent of fresh lilac perfumed the air. We sat at the family table, a place of honor, directly across from the newlyweds' seats. David's family joined us, warm, generous people who welcomed conversation with ease. We laughed and chatted as waiters poured glasses of champagne in preparation for the first toast. The newlyweds entered the ballroom hand in hand, and the entire room stood to cheer. Jessica had changed into a sleek satin gown, perfect for dancing. She glowed, every bit the star of the evening. David looked equally radiant, his smile never leaving his face. After their speech, sincere, grateful, full of love, we raised our glasses for a toast. I looked across the candlelit room and whispered, "To their happiness." Cheers. Robert echoed, and we clinked glasses. As the first course was served and laughter floated through the air, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. Everything was perfect, or so I thought. The first course arrived with flair and fragrance, a display of smoked salmon arranged like petals on fine porcelain, accented with edible flowers and a delicate herb drizzle. Around me, guests sighed in appreciation, forks raised in anticipation. I smiled, sipping champagne, and nodding at the sheer artistry on every plate. It was everything Jessica had dreamed of for her wedding, a flawless, unforgettable evening. Robert, however, wasn't smiling. I caught the subtle shift in his expression the moment waiters emerged from the kitchen carrying the second course. His body tensed like a wire pulled taut. I'd seen that look before. It was the same look he wore the night he rescued a family from a burning apartment, the same focus in his eyes when instinct screamed that something was wrong. "Robert?" I whispered, setting down my glass. "What is it?" He didn't respond at first. His eyes, once warm and soft, had hardened into something unreadable. He was tracking the waiter's every move, his focus locked on the plates being carried from the swinging kitchen doors to the tables across the room. I turned in my seat. Confused, the reception buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses. Jessica and David were still seated at the sweetheart table, beaming as guests toasted their future. My mother was busy chatting with one of David's aunts at our table, unaware of the tension thickening in Robert's posture beside me. The waiter approached us with a smile, lowering a dish before me. Sautéed white fish with lemon butter sauce, paired with a seasonal medley of vegetables, he announced with practiced grace. I glanced at the plate, beautifully plated, golden and crisp at the edges. It smelled divine, but Robert didn't look at the food. He looked at me. Not with love, not with affection, but with barely contained panic. "Don't eat that," he said, his voice low but firm, a whisper packed with urgency. I blinked. "What? Why? Just trust me. Don't touch it. We're leaving now. Wait, what are you talking about?" I looked around, but no one seemed to be watching us. "Robert, this is Jessica's wedding. We can't just," I said. "Now." His voice dropped lower, his eyes piercing mine. "I'll explain everything. Just stand up." I hesitated, caught between fear and confusion. This was absurd. We were at a wedding. My sister's wedding. But something in Robert's face, a subtle trembling, a look I'd never seen, made me move. As discreetly as possible, he rose, extended a hand, and guided me away from the table. My heart pounded with embarrassment and anxiety. I glanced back. Once Jessica was still smiling, unaware, lost in conversation. For a moment her eyes flicked to us, but she didn't react. If she noticed us leaving, she showed no sign of concern. We moved through the hotel lobby like shadows, past glittering centerpieces and hushed whispers. I didn't speak until we reached the elevator, the soft chime marking our descent into the underground parking garage. Inside the car, Robert didn't start the engine immediately. Instead, he stared at the steering wheel, breathing heavily. I waited. Finally, he turned to me. "Did you notice anything strange tonight? About the kitchen?" "No," I said slowly. "What are you talking about?" "What is this about, Robert?" He reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a stack of papers, photocopies of documents, some with sticky notes in his handwriting. "Maggie," he said gently, "do you remember how we notified the hotel about your peanut allergy?" "Yes." "Of course. Jessica and I both made sure the menu was safe." "That's what I thought too," he said, "until I saw something." He paused, searching for the right words. "Before dinner service, I went to the restroom. On the way back, I passed by the kitchen. Jessica was there talking to the chef." I frowned. "So, that's not strange. She helped plan the menu." "Let me finish," he said, voice tightening. "She wasn't just chatting. She was pointing, giving instructions." And then the chef reached into a cabinet and pulled out a small, dark bottle. I stared at him, dread crawling up my spine. "A bottle of what?" "Peanut oil." The words landed like a slap. "No," I whispered. "That's not possible." Robert's eyes locked onto mine. "Maggie, I've been a firefighter for nearly 2 decades. I've responded to more emergency calls than I can count. I've seen what allergic reactions can do, how fast they can kill. I know what peanut oil bottles look like. I know the smell." I watched him pour a few drops onto one of the plates before it was covered and placed on a tray. My mouth went dry. And then, he continued, I watched that tray go to our table. I felt the breath leave my body. "You think Jessica tried to poison me?" He didn't answer. His silence said enough. Tears stung my eyes. "She wouldn't." Robert, this has to be a mistake. Jessica, she loves me. We're sisters. Robert reached for my hand. I didn't want to believe it either, but there's more. He handed me one of the papers from the stack. It was a copy of my father's will. You remember the inheritance terms? Yes, 70% to me, 30 to Jessica. But my voice caught. If I die first, she gets everything. Robert nodded grimly. Exactly. I found this clause last week when reviewing documents with the lawyer. It didn't mean much then, but now. I sank back into the seat. Numb, my own sister. My flesh and blood. She always resented how much time I spent with Dad, I said softly, the memories pouring in. When he got sick, she vanished. I adjusted my work schedule to be his caretaker, took him to every appointment. Cooked for him, helped him bathe. She never came once. And your father noticed, Robert said. That's why he left you more. A bitter taste filled my mouth. She always said she didn't care about money, she lied. Robert pulled out another document. Last month, during dinner, David mentioned that Jessica wanted to use part of the inheritance to open a second restaurant, maybe even a chain. I blinked. How could she plan that? I never told her I'd give her any money. She didn't plan to ask you, Robert said darkly. She planned to take it. A heavy silence fell over the car. She tried to kill me. I said at last, voice barely audible. At her own wedding. Robert squeezed my hand. But she didn't, because I saw her. Because I know you. And because I'd die before letting anything happen to you. A sob escaped me, sudden and violent. The betrayal burned hotter than any fire Robert had ever fought. What do we do now? I asked. We report it, he said. Anonymously. For now, let the hotel investigate. We'll gather everything, photos, statements, the kitchen footage, anything we can find. If we have enough, we take it to the police. The weight of it crushed my chest, but Robert was right. I couldn't pretend this didn't happen. I had to face it, and Jessica. She had to face the consequences. Back at home, I curled up on the couch, wrapped in Robert's arms, my mind racing through memories of shared birthdays, childhood secrets, late-night calls. How had we ended up here? You know what scares me the most? I whispered. If you hadn't been there, I would have eaten it. I would have died. But you didn't, Robert said, kissing my temple. Because you're not alone. And in that moment, I knew whatever happened next, whatever came from facing the truth, I would survive, because I had something. Jessica had long since lost. Real love, real family, and a reason to fight. 3 days had passed since the wedding, and the world hadn't stopped spinning, though mine had shifted permanently. I hadn't spoken to Jessica. I hadn't even opened the text messages she had sent after the reception was abruptly ended. My phone lay silent on the kitchen counter like a bomb I was too afraid to disarm. Robert had already made the anonymous report to the hotel's management the night we returned. He told them exactly what he saw, that a guest with a known documented peanut allergy had nearly been served a dish contaminated with peanut oil, and that someone, possibly even a member of the wedding party, had orchestrated it. He didn't name names yet. But the information was enough to trigger an internal investigation, especially since the hotel had been warned of my allergy in advance. A mistake like that wasn't just bad press, it was a lawsuit waiting to happen. The next morning, Robert received a call. The hotel had taken the report seriously. Surveillance footage was already being reviewed. The plate I was supposed to receive had indeed been marked specially. Footage showed Jessica approaching the chef before dinner service. She whispered something, pointed toward the list of seat numbers, and handed over a small bottle. The camera didn't catch their voices, but it was all clear enough. The chef, an older man with a reputation for discretion, it as instructed. When the hotel's representative called to inform us of the findings, they were quiet, cautious, professional. The chef had already been placed on suspension. They didn't confirm names, but the pieces were unmistakably coming together. Peanut oil had been found on my dish, even though the menu had explicitly excluded any allergens due to my known medical risk. Someone had intentionally added it. It wasn't cross-contamination. It was premeditated, and Jessica, my sister, had orchestrated it all. I sat in silence at our kitchen table, staring out the window. Morning sunlight dappled the hardwood floor, catching dust particles that floated like snow. I should have felt rage. I should have been screaming. But instead, I felt hollow. Betrayal this deep didn't come with sound. It was quiet, heavy. It settled into your bones. Robert was on the phone in the other room, speaking with a lawyer he knew through the fire department. I overheard fragments. Attempted murder, documented allergy. Surveillance footage, motive tied to inheritance. The words felt unreal, like we were characters in a crime drama. But this wasn't television. This was my life, and my sister had tried to end it. The rest of the world still didn't know what happened at the wedding. To guests, the evening had ended with confusion, an announcement from hotel staff that there had been a kitchen issue, that the meal couldn't be served, that the reception was cut short out of an abundance of caution. Most people assumed it was a food poisoning scare. Jessica and David were seen leaving quickly afterward. No one suspected the truth. Not yet, but they would. By the end of the week, Robert and I had collected enough to go to the police. The hotel, perhaps fearing liability, handed over copies of the security footage and confirmed in writing that peanut oil was found in the kitchen and on my plated meal. We had copies of my medical records, emergency room visits from the past, letters from my allergist documenting the severity of my condition. We even had witness statements from 2 waiters who, when questioned by hotel management, remembered Jessica speaking to the chef moments before service. The police didn't dismiss it. They didn't laugh. They listened carefully, took notes, reviewed everything, and promised to open a formal investigation. That night, I didn't sleep. The following morning, David showed up at our house. I opened the door to find him standing on the porch, his face drawn and pale, dark circles under his eyes. He looked nothing like the confident man who had stood beside Jessica at the altar. "Maggie," he said, his voice hollow. "Can we talk?" Robert stood beside me protectively, but I nodded and stepped aside. David came in slowly, like a man walking into a fire he couldn't escape. We sat at the dining room table. He didn't ask for anything, not water, not forgiveness, just silence at first. Then he spoke. "I didn't know." His hands trembled as he pressed them together, resting them on the table like a prayer. "I swear to you, Maggie, I didn't know what she was planning." I watched him carefully. "You were going to open a second restaurant." His eyes snapped to mine, wide with panic. "She mentioned it months ago. Said her inheritance could help us expand. But I thought she meant money she was saving. Or something she'd get after your mother passed away. Not this. You never questioned why she was talking about spending money she didn't have yet?" I asked. He bowed his head. "I was naive. I thought she was excited. We were planning our future. I didn't know she was planning yours to end." For a long time, I said nothing. Then I asked quietly, "Do you still love her?" "I love the person I thought she was."
His voice cracked, but that person never existed.
"I filed for divorce yesterday. I can't go on pretending. And I needed you to hear it from me." He left shortly after, and I stood at the window watching his car drive away. Jessica's perfect life was crumbling. And the worst part? She had done it to herself. By the end of that week, Jessica was arrested. The charge was attempted murder. Her lawyer immediately tried to claim temporary insanity, citing stress from wedding planning and unresolved childhood trauma. But the evidence was too strong. The premeditation, the motive, the inheritance, the bottle of peanut oil discovered in her belongings. It was all there. And still, she didn't speak to me. I didn't attend the first court hearing. I couldn't. Mom went, though. I begged her not to, but she insisted. When she returned, she looked like she'd aged 10 years. "I saw her," Mom whispered, her voice breaking. "In that courtroom. In those handcuffs." "Maggie," she looked at me like a stranger. I wrapped my arms around her as she cried. "I always favored her," she wept. "I loved you both, but I always leaned toward Jessica. I thought she needed me more. I didn't see any of this." "You didn't do this," I whispered. "She did. I let her believe love meant leniency, that she'd always be forgiven, that there'd never be consequences." We cried together for a long time. Then, after a moment, she said something that made my breath catch. She asked for you. What? She told her lawyer she wants to speak with you. One-on-one, just once. I froze. For a moment, my heart stirred. I wanted to see her face, to hear her voice, to ask her why. But then I remembered the plate. The oil, the will. The smile she gave me just before I almost died. No, I said quietly. Not yet. I wasn't ready. I didn't know if I ever would be. For now, I needed to heal. A few days later, Sarah, my best friend since college, came over with coffee and takeout and made me sit on the couch like a sick child. Do you know how hard it is, she said, to see your name in court documents? I laughed, though it came out more like a cough. You should try being me. You're not alone, she said firmly. You have people who love you. People who would fight for you, real family. I looked at Robert, who was drying dishes in the kitchen. His sleeves were rolled up, and he hummed softly as he worked, the same way he always did when trying to soothe the storm. I watched him and nodded. Yes, I said softly, I do. Weeks passed. The media didn't pick up the full story, thank God, but whispers circulated within our social circle. Guests from the wedding talked in hushed tones about the strange end to the reception, about Jessica's sudden absence from social media, about David moving out of their shared apartment just days after their honeymoon was supposed to begin. Only a handful of people knew the truth. That Jessica Winston, the bride who glowed with happiness under the chandeliers of the Grand Pacific Hotel, was now awaiting trial for attempted murder, and her older sister, the one who'd always stood in her shadow, was the intended victim. The realization still staggered me. No matter how many times I said it aloud, some mornings I would wake up and forget for a moment. I'd make coffee and hum while feeding the cat, thinking about errands or housework until something small, like the clink of dishes or the smell of roasted peanuts from a TV ad, brought it all back. And then the fog would settle again. Robert did everything he could to help. He was gentle but firm, holding me when I cried, stepping back when I needed space, encouraging me to journal, to cook, to walk, to live. His presence was my constant lighthouse through the storm. One Saturday morning, I sat on our back porch with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders, staring at the sunlight filtered through the trees. I was sipping tea when he joined me, holding a manila envelope. I picked up the court transcripts, he said softly. I nodded and reached for them with hesitant fingers. The manila felt heavier than it should. Inside were printed records of her preliminary hearing, Jessica's lawyer's defense, her statements, the judge's comments. I didn't open it. Do you want me to go over them with you? Robert asked. I shook my head. Not yet. He set the envelope beside me and placed a hand on mine. You don't have to carry this alone. I know. I leaned against him. But I think I need to sit with it a while, just me. He nodded, kissed the top of my head, and left me to the quiet, eventually. I did read it. Jessica hadn't confessed outright, but her silence had been damning. She didn't deny that she gave the chef a bottle of peanut oil. Her lawyer claimed she was under immense stress, that she'd become unwell, that the line between jealousy and obsession had blurred. They were planning to argue diminished capacity, but the prosecution had overwhelming evidence: camera footage, text messages, witness statements, including David's, and, of course, the bottle of oil itself. I learned she cried during the hearing, that she said nothing when asked if she wanted to address the court, but still, she hadn't asked to speak to me again, not until a week before her formal trial date. That's when the letter came. It was handwritten, folded into an envelope with no return address, but I knew the script. I'd seen it scrawled across birthday cards, across the cover of a childhood diary we once shared. Maggie, I know you don't want to see me. I wouldn't want to see me either. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't even know if I deserve to be alive, let alone forgiven. But I need to tell you something, even if it's only once. I was angry. Not just jealous, furious. At life. At Dad. At how he loved you more. Or maybe how you earned it. I felt invisible next to you. You were always the good one, the quiet one, the one who sat by his hospital bed and held his hand and watched him slip away with kindness in your eyes. I hated that I couldn't be that person. And instead of changing, I broke. I thought if you were gone, I could finally be seen. I know how twisted that sounds. It is twisted. But in that moment, it made sense to me. Like there was no other way to exist except without you. But when I saw you stand at the chapel, tears in your eyes, clapping with all your heart for me, something in me cracked. I hated myself. I still do. I didn't think you'd survive, but you did, because you always survive. Because you're stronger than I will ever be. I don't expect you to write back. I don't even expect you to believe me, but I needed you to know that once upon a time, I really did love you. And that version of me who played dolls with you in the living room, who whispered secrets to you under blankets during storms, she still exists, somewhere, buried. Deep beneath the monster I became. I'm sorry. For everything. Jess, I read the letter twice. Then I folded it carefully and tucked it inside a drawer. I didn't cry, not then. Not even later that night, because I didn't know what to feel. Anger. Pity? A glimmer of hope? All I felt was tired. Mom came over the next morning, bringing fresh scones and trying too hard to be cheerful. She'd aged so much these past few months. Her hair had thinned, and her once vibrant voice now trembled like a brittle branch in the wind. She hadn't visited Jessica in jail. Couldn't. She'd sent one letter and received a short reply. She told me not to come, Mom whispered. Sipping her tea, said she couldn't bear to see my face. You didn't do this, I reminded her gently. I raised her, she replied, looking down, and I raised you. And somewhere along the way, I gave more to one than the other. I don't know how to live with that. You love us both. But love doesn't fix what people break on their own. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You're my daughter, she said, but you're also my strength. You always were. That afternoon, I sat in my garden and finally allowed myself to grieve, not just for what happened, but for what would never be the relationship Jessica and I might have had, the trust we would never rebuild, the shared future that had, shattered like a broken champagne glass at the reception, and yet somewhere inside that grief was the smallest spark of something I hadn't expected. Compassion. I would never forget what she did. I would never excuse it. But maybe one day, far in the future, I could forgive her, not for her sake, but for mine, because I didn't want to carry this hate forever. It was too heavy. And I had people who loved me too much to live in its shadow. Robert and I took a trip the following weekend. Just the two of us. We drove up the coast, stayed in a small cabin by the sea, and spent our mornings watching waves crash against the rocks and our nights tangled in silence and healing. It was there, on the second morning, that I told him, I think I'll go see her. Just once. Robert didn't flinch.
He simply nodded. Double quotes, do it for you, he said softly. Not for her.
I know. When I walked into the visiting area at the detention center, my heart thudded so loudly it felt like thunder inside my chest. Jessica sat on the other side of the glass, her face thinner, her eyes hollowed. She looked up when I entered, lips parting slightly. I picked up the receiver. She picked up hers. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then finally I said, You tried to kill me. Tears spilled down her face. I know. And I still don't understand why. She looked away. Because I was broken. And I thought taking you out would fix me. It didn't. She shook her head. No, I swallowed. I came because I needed to see it. Your face. Your eyes. I needed to know if the girl who used to build blanket forts with me was really gone. Jessica's voice cracked. She's still in here somewhere. I didn't cry, not in that room. But something inside me settled. A tiny, quiet acceptance that this chapter of our lives was over. I can't forgive you. Not yet, I said. I don't expect you to, she whispered. But I'm going to live, I continued. And I'm going to live well. That's the best answer I can give you. She nodded. I hope one day you find a way to live too. We hung up the receivers. And I walked away, back home. I tucked the letter in a small cedar box. I wouldn't forget. But I wouldn't let it define me either. Weeks turned into months. Jessica was convicted of attempted murder, given a sentence that reflected both the premeditation and her mental state. She would be incarcerated for years with the possibility of psychiatric treatment and eventual parole. I moved forward. I reconnected with old friends. I hosted dinners. I started volunteering at a local center for people with chronic allergies, helping raise awareness. Robert and I found new rituals. Slow breakfasts, spontaneous road trips, dancing in the kitchen to old 80s music. Laughter returned to our home like spring after a long, bitter winter. One morning, as sunlight streamed into our bedroom, I looked at him and said, "I want to write a book." He grinned. "About what?" I smiled. "About betrayal. About survival. About how real family sometimes has nothing to do with blood."
He nodded, "Then write it."
And so I did.